Then my producer rings me up and says Tice is on at 6. So now they're laughing at me, Richard Tice. What's going on?
Well, you know, Jeremy, I mean, it's all about influence, isn't it? Look, I'm delighted to be with you. And what a day. Just another extraordinary series of events. I mean, just remarkable. What is going on? Where do we start?
Right, we'll start with, I thought he was called Yang Tenbo, but a guy who's a historian calls him Chris Yang. This is the alleged, we have to understand, we have to say that, Chinese spy, who basically was thrown out of the country in 2023 for fostering relations. We've seen pictures with Theresa May, with David Cameron. It all kicked off because of that man who judges friendship so well, the Duke of York. I mean, come on, Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, a Chinese spy, the list just goes on. This all picked up, and you, his identity had been protected, but you, as the Deputy Leader of Reform, were going to stand up in Parliament using parliamentary privilege and identify him, but I believe literally minutes before you were due to do that, the High Court, knowing that his identity had been released in Ireland, agreed to let that go. Tell us why you, Richard Tice, and Reform were so keen for this man's name to be known.
Well, because it was so extraordinary. I mean, how did this gentleman earn the right to retain anonymity in a case where serious allegations of spying are involved? And you have to wonder, well, why? What's he done so special? And that made us very, very nervous. And we could only conclude, actually, that in a sense, the establishment was embarrassed because maybe this gentleman has been involved in various parts of the establishment over many, many years. And it was all just a bit too inconvenient, a bit too embarrassing. And sure enough, it turns out that he's clearly very well known in the Conservative Party. Pictures emerged of him with Theresa May, with David Cameron, clearly very close in earlier years to George Osborne when he was kowtowing to China, when he had the bright idea that maybe the Chinese should fund and build and operate a nuclear power station in this country, another piece of absolute lunacy. And we just thought, why? What is going on? Why are they protecting this man? And then we discover that he's involved in all sorts of other things in the academic world. The truth is, he's had his tentacles, it would appear, into the upper echelons of the British establishment, who clearly didn't want to be embarrassed. And we just felt that was inappropriate, and the British people deserve to know who this gentleman is and was.
I completely agree. Ironically, his picture's on screen, and I will make the Deputy Leader of Reform smile. He looks like a character out of Johnny English at best, doesn't he? He's not what you'd suddenly assume would be a spy. Of course, the traction to the story and the reason, I think, you know, because he's been out the country for a year and a bit, is the Prince Andrew link. And Andrew, I mean, honestly, Richard, I'm not asking you to criticise something, but honestly, his choice of friends, I'm beginning to feel embarrassed for him. Tom Tugendhat described him as a useful idiot, and Robert Jobson said, the royal expert said, I just removed the word useful. Because, of course, what does he know? But you can imagine the Chinese thinking we're very close to the king's brother. I mean, it's an extraordinary lapse of judgment. But you make the point, not just Prince Andrew, and I'm not defending him because he's an idiot, but there are loads of other people, and it might just be that you're right.
I'm much more cynical than that, I'm afraid, Jeremy. I think that actually the parts of the establishment who are embarrassed by being essentially taken in by this gentleman, they use the Prince Andrew thing as a sort of, you know, dead cat. Oh, look, there's a distraction over there. Don't look over here. And, you know, I'm just pleased that we at Reform, once again, there are only 5 of us in the Commons, but again, we've changed the course of history. And our threat to use parliamentary privilege, within a few hours, the gentleman's barrister has approached the court and says, well, we're happy for the name to be out there because it's going to be out there anyway. So
common sense.
We're leading the agenda.
Common sense politics. You owe us that. I mean, we've given you common sense and you've run with it. Now, that's the alleged Chinese spy. I'm just going to try and be really calm as we talk about our Prime Minister, who didn't have a particularly good morning, Mr. Tice, because he woke up to discover that, according to a poll, 61% of people in this country said that he was the worst Prime Minister in modern history. Now, if you think what we've had recently, Liz Truss, bless her, Boris Johnson, nearly Michael Foot, nearly Jeremy Corbyn, I mean, that's pretty damning. On the back of that, he thought it would be a really good day to announce his, I can't even believe I'm reading this, He's sending a surrender squad of 100 civil servants, the blob, that was actually making them come into work because they're usually off work. They're going to go to Brussels to, quote, junk Brexit for closer EU ties. Now, I have had so many people say, we always knew it, we're going to... Well, yes, everybody knows it. He doesn't care about the United Kingdom, he doesn't care about Brexit. He will do anything, will he not, to bring us closer to Europe. Where does that leave the people, Richard Tice, who voted 8 years ago in a referendum and won the vote? Where does that leave people like that?
Raging. And it's quite extraordinary. I mean, obviously, we're very upset about it and we're not going to tolerate it. Look, why would you want to get closer to an entity or an organisation or a European Union that is patently failing, that's making its citizens poorer, that's completely lost control of its own immigration borders in the same way that we have, and its main economy, called Germany, is in recession, extraordinarily is doing even worse than we are. Why
and its government's just lost a vote this afternoon of confidence because they're going to go to the right as well.
Why would you want to use that as a model of economic competence that you want to copy and follow and get closer to? You want to be running as far as possible. You want to be getting closer to the United States of America, where, guess what, they're growing at 2% plus, and under President-elect Trump, I think in a couple of years' time, they'll be going at 3% plus. And we want to say, well, how do you do that? Well, you have cheap energy by drill, baby, drill. You cut daft regulations, just have smart regulations. And you cut excessive levels of taxation that reduce the incentive to work and reduce the incentive to take risk and be entrepreneurs of small, medium and big businesses. It's really not rocket science. It's basic economics. And that's what Keir Starmer and everybody involved in running this country should be looking to do, to say, how do we do as well as the Americans do?
Yeah. It's interesting, though, isn't it? From my point of view, sitting here every single day, I can't work out, you're in the House, I can't work out whether he's completely incompetent. He thinks I've got such a big majority that in 5 years people will have forgotten. But almost every decision, Richard, in the last 5 months, be it the pensioners, the farmers, the EU... These are not just throwaway things. I can guarantee that the British pensioners will not forget what he did, like the poll tax did for Maggie. I can guarantee that the farmers are not only going to not give up, but they know it's a land grab and they will never forgive Keir Starmer. And the same will happen here with people who voted for Brexit, people who believed that that was going to happen, whether it was flawed or not. And actually, the irony of all of this is it's very short-sighted of Keir Starmer. So is it incompetence? Is it because he doesn't care? Because if this 5 months is replicated another 9 times, 10 times, whatever it is for 5 years, I don't think the Labour Party will win for 30 years, man. I genuinely mean that.
No, the truth is that it's actually ideological. Look, we all make mistakes. If you make a decision in government, and no one's saying it's easy, and you've clearly got it wrong because of the uproar that's been caused, whether it's by the pensioners or by the farmers. If you've just got a tweak wrong, a nuance wrong, you've got a sort of a threshold level wrong, and then you listen to everybody and say, and actually I think voters quite like it when people in positions of authority say, do you know what, on this one, I've got it wrong, I've listened, we're going to change our mind and we're going to learn from it and hopefully not make the same mistake again. You get a lot more brownie points for that than this absolute ideological lurch towards a mild form of communism, which is what we've got, where basically the government seems quite happy if the state ends up owning large chunks of land. It can carpet with lots of billions of solar panels made in China.
I'll go further. I think the British people have got to a point. I wanted to bring up something with you, actually. I'll go further and say I think the British people have got to a point where, and I call it the Trump moment, I believe that they will now swallow a politician who stands up, man and woman, and says, right, this is me and this is my plan. I have been married twice. I've made a few mistakes. I might have done that when I was 16. I'm flawed, but this is my plan. Come with me. There'll be highs, there'll be lows, but I'm gonna take you on that journey. I'm not going to BS you. I'm going to give you on a daily basis, a weekly basis, whatever. I think that's the Trump phenomenon. I think it's just people are fed up with being lied to and not knowing what they're going to get. Now, I had a caller earlier, and I'll put this to you. This guy's exasperated. He joined Reform over the weekend. He spent £25. He said, I couldn't really afford it, but I am so hacked off with what I see in this country. But he said to me, what worries me is that Reform and the Tories will still, in 4.5 years, split the vote, whatever anybody tells them, and that will let Labour in. What would the Deputy Leader of Reform say to that?
Well, firstly, I'm very grateful that he's seen common sense and joined us. And I know, but for many people, our membership is going through 100,000 and soaring. But it's real money at a time when people are struggling. So I'm grateful for that. But I would say that we've got the momentum. And look, competition's a good thing. It makes everybody perform better. Think about this, though. After 14 years, voters voted to get the Tories out. And they voted tactically. Never underestimate the common sense of the British voter. Roll forwards 4 years, I think people would vote tactically to get Labour out. And I can see a scenario where Labour collapse in the same way that this time round the Tories collapsed. And what I think people will say after a difficult few years under this Labour Party, say, well, the Tories blew it after 14 years. Labour bankrupted us after just a few years. At least Reform have been around the block, we've been in the world of business, we've got some experience, and we've got the courage of our convictions to tell it as it is. And sometimes the truth hurts, and sometimes it's uncomfortable. But at least we're brave enough to tell it as it is, and we've got, real passion. And
yeah, that's true.
We just feel that, we've got a strong sense of how we're going to dig this country out of the mire, and no one else has got a clue as far as I can see.
Right, 3 stories, dig this country out of the mire. I want your response to these 3 stories. Firstly, this is getting traction. Some local elections may be postponed next spring as Sir Keir Starmer and the dreadful Andrea Rayner push through council devolution plans. This afternoon, Jim McMahon, the Minister for Housing, Community and Local Government, suggested that councils that end up being merged or disbanded could hold off elections until local authority reforms happen. So basically, some people in May won't even be able to protest vote about this bloody government, Richard. That's an outrage.
And this from a government, one of whose previous members, Harriet Harman, just yesterday on TV channels said that reform was a threat to democracy. Well, I think if you're the governing party and you cancel democratic elections, I think you're the threat to democracy.
I think it's absolutely outrageous. Now, 2, I mean, these are not lighter-hearted. These are the very reasons I think that reform exists. That Nigel Farage, your man, voicing fury today after an OnlyFans model who threw a milkshake in his face was spared jail. This is Victoria Thomas Bowens, launched him outside the pub, and Nigel's making the point that you can criminally attack somebody in public if you're, in that position, and you get a suspended sentence. He has a point there. I mean, people will go, oh, it was a woman, it was a... No, not a woman, they'll say it was an OnlyFans model and it was a publicity stunt and it was a milkshake. Could have been a bomb. Could have been anything.
But I was just behind him when that happened, and it's very scary because you've no idea what it is that is coming towards you. And quite rightly, Nigel was furious, and it was only literally just a few days after he decided to come back into frontline politics. And one of the things that had been holding him back was that very sort of activity. And so it was, it was a really bad moment. And this was a carefully calculated assault. That's what it was. It was an assault. And we've got 2-tier justice. You can put something daft in a tweet and go to jail for 2 years, even though you've taken it down and apologised after a couple of hours, and it wasn't premeditated or anything. But no, you can assault a leading politician in an election time, and you just get a little slap on the wrist because you're an OnlyFans person. I'm sorry, it just doesn't wash. It's proof that we have 2-tier justice in this country, and it's unacceptable, it's despicable, and it's got to stop.
As a party, I mean, we're seeing here what Nigel says. We now live in a country where you can assault a member of parliament and not go to prison. The latest example of 2-tier justice. She should have served a sentence. Can I bring you to my story of the day? Because I know my good friend RT will give me an honest answer. Take a breath, Richard Tice. A convicted jihadi terrorist is taking a pub to court after he claimed to be deeply offended by the sign outside the venue. Khalid Bagger, who has previously spent 4 years behind bars for preparing jihadi propaganda, 4 years for that, wants more than 1,850 quid from the Saracen's Head in Amersham, Buckinghamshire. By the way, the landlord's on this show in 10 minutes. He's criticised what he describes as the racist depiction of a bearded Arab Turkish man on the pub sign and also insisted the depiction incites violence. The landlord has described it as a complete joke, but Backer says, I will be attacking 30 other pubs if I'm successful. And presumably, Richard Tice is using taxpayers' money. Could you just say to the people of this country listening and watching this, what does this say about where we're at? It's ludicrous, man.
Well, actually, I must say, looking at that picture, it's a rather splendid picture of a rather handsome gentleman with a, very well dressed. But it is completely and utterly bonkers. And I fear that you are right, that he could well be claiming legal aid. I mean, that would be the ultimate insult to hard-working, hard-pressed British taxpayers.
Yeah.
If this guy... I mean, basically, he's on a gravy train, isn't he? He's using someone else's cash to try and fleece this publican. And I do hope that the publican is able to stand up and stop this nonsense.
But I want my politicians. I want my politicians, not the government, to stand up and say, I mean, this shouldn't even been allowed. And somebody said to me earlier, oh, yeah, some left-wing lawyer, oh, he'll take the gig or she'll take the gig because that's... And he said there will be people out there, this is what I can't handle, Richard, who will think this guy's got a case. What are we talking about? This country's on its backside and this is given... I can't do it. I don't understand.
Well, he's either got legal aid or he's got a lawyer, that a sort of ambulance-chasing lawyer. Yeah. That is in for a percentage of whatever he can get. And I'm afraid to say that there are those sort of evil, malicious creeps in the legal system who will do that. And frankly, they should be ashamed of themselves. This is just a ludicrous situation. It just sort of typifies where we're at as a nation. No one's got the courage, and people in the legal system and the courts just say, don't be so daft. Throw it out, stick it in the bin and put it outside.
And I think that's the point, isn't it? I know we make a lot about, talk, common sense. Reform always talks about common sense. Nigel, both of you talk about common sense. But I do feel like we're getting to a point in this country actually crossing over your political preference where people are just going... This would have been deemed outrageous before, but actually they're going, hold on a second, I've lived here all my life, I've paid my taxes, never broken the law, I've never had a handout. We're having that taken out of us, and that is only possible because our systems are so... There are so many loopholes, and we have to toughen up and wise up. And as you quite rightly say, this is ridiculous. You've been... Throw it out, but he'll get leverage and he'll get coverage, and I just think that's...
It's all about weak leadership.
Yeah.
For the last decade and a half, under the Tories, where people haven't been prepared to say, no, it ain't happening, stop it, don't be daft. And, that's what we need, strong, robust, clear leadership. I think that's what the country is crying out for. You don't have to agree with every policy. You don't actually have to like the people involved in the leadership, but you have to like their conviction and their passion to get something done. And I think that's why President-elect Trump created a coalition of people, said, who's most likely to make me, an American citizen, better off? And they concluded that will be Trump. And I think at the next election, people are going to say, who's going to make me better off in the United Kingdom? And I think the answer will be Nigel and Richard and the other people leading Reform UK. We will make British people better off.
Word reaches me that we're getting drunk on Thursday night. Is that right?
I couldn't possibly comment. You speak for yourself, Jeremy.
Look at the face on you. Tice, man, thank you so much indeed. Really interesting. Richard Tice, Deputy Leader of Reform, responding to all of those stories in the news today and saying